The British royal family, the jewels, the palaces, the waving from balconies. It's all part of a carefully curated fairy tale. But behind the pageantry lies a web of secrecy, privilege, and power that shielded them for centuries. For all the pomp and tradition, the monarchy has weathered scandals that would sink lesser institutions. And not just the odd embarrassing headline either. From cash-filled suitcases to tax-free fortunes, from shady friends to conspiracy theories that just won't die, the royal family's history isn't all tea and corgis. So today on Tenfold Gold, we're tearing down the royal curtain and exposing some of the dirtiest secrets that have kept the monarchy afloat. If you're tired of sugar-coated stories and you're ready for the real deal, give us a like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because we're about to wade into the murky waters of the world's most famous family. Point 1. Prince Charles and the Qatari suitcase full of cash. Let's start with a story that sounds like it belongs in a dodgy spy film, not Buckingham Palace. In 2022, reports broke that Prince Charles, now King Charles III, accepted £3 million in cash from a former Qatari prime minister. Yes, cash, in literal suitcases and Fortnum & Mason shopping bags. Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim bin Jaber Al Thani, a billionaire with a less-than-sparkling human rights record, handed over the money in 3 installments, apparently to support the prince's charities. But here's the bit that raised eyebrows. There was no public accounting, no oversight, and no paper trail. The palace said it was all above board, but charities experts and MPs called it out for what it was: shady and untransparent. Even in the context of the monarchy's labyrinthine finances, this felt like something out of a Bond film. And it wasn't a one-off slip. The royal family has a long history of accepting money from what some would call questionable friends. So while Charles might talk about modernizing the monarchy, the suitcase full of cash shows that some old habits die hard, especially when the donor's pockets are lined with oil money. Point 2. Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. If there's one royal scandal that's impossible to dismiss with a smile and a wave, it's Prince Andrew's sordid ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew wasn't just a passing acquaintance. He was a frequent guest at Epstein's homes, flying on his private jets and enjoying the hospitality of a man who was a convicted sex offender. The photograph of Andrew with Virginia Giuffre, the woman who says she was trafficked to him as a teenager, has become one of the defining images of the scandal. Andrew has always denied the allegations, but the damage was done, and it's not just about a single encounter. His friendship with Epstein, a man whose predatory empire was an open secret, showed a staggering disregard for propriety, ethics, and frankly, decency. When the scandal finally caught up with him, Andrew gave that infamous interview with the BBC. You know the one, sweating in the hot seat, mumbling excuses about being medically incapable of sweating, a claim that's never been substantiated and sounds suspiciously convenient. He said he had no regrets about his friendship with Epstein, even as the world watched in disbelief. The fallout was brutal. Andrew was stripped of his patronages and military titles, banished from public life, and yet, incredibly, he's still a royal, in name and in blood, and still lives on money provided by the British taxpayer. This wasn't just a PR disaster for Andrew. It was a black eye for the entire monarchy, a reminder that the royal family isn't just a symbol of national unity, it's also capable of catastrophic moral failure. And if you think this was an isolated slip-up, keep watching, because the Royal House of Windsor has a long history of ignoring scandal when it suits them. Point 3. The Royal Blackmail Plot, 2007. If you needed proof that the royal family's world isn't all tiaras and fairy tales, look no further than the blackmail plot that rocked the tabloids in 2007. The details? Scandalous enough for a soap opera. 2 men were arrested and charged with attempting to blackmail a member of the royal family. Someone so senior that the palace's legal team went into overdrive to keep their identity under wraps. They threatened to release footage of alleged sexual activity and drug use involving the royal, a story that, to this day, remains officially unconfirmed. Who was the royal? The palace never said, and the courts ordered strict reporting limits. But the fact that the alleged footage even existed was enough to send shockwaves through the monarchy. The blackmailers were eventually jailed, but the cloud of suspicion and scandal has never really lifted. The secrecy around it only fuels the public's appetite for speculation, a reminder that even when the law says to hush up, the whispers never really stop. And let's be honest, it's not like the royal family hasn't had its share of secrets, indiscretions, and cover-ups. This wasn't the first, and as we'll see, it certainly wasn't the last time the royals were caught in a web of rumor and scandal that stretched far beyond the palace gates. The monarchy might prefer to bury these stories, but history has a funny way of dragging them back into the light. Point 4. Historical scandals. A royal tradition. If you think scandal in the monarchy is a modern invention, think again. The British royal family has been weathering storms of gossip and disgrace for centuries, and some of them make the modern headlines look downright tame. Start with King Edward VIII, who famously gave up the throne in 1936 to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee, and more worryingly for many, a woman with suspected Nazi sympathies. It wasn't just a love story. It was a constitutional crisis that rattled the very foundation of the monarchy. Then there was Princess Margaret, Queen Elizabeth II's younger sister, whose affair with a married man, Group Captain Peter Townsend, scandalized the 1950s. For a monarchy that claimed to embody moral virtue, the revelation was a dagger to the heart of their carefully cultivated image. And let's not forget the more recent firestorm, Charles and Diana. Their public unraveling, from Diana's heartbreaking interviews about Camilla Parker Bowles to Charles's own confessions of adultery, turned the royal family's dirty laundry into front-page news across the world. Each of these scandals exposed the tension at the heart of the monarchy, the clash between a royal code of silence and the unstoppable appetite of a public that wants the truth, or at least the gossip. They're reminders that the royal family's spotless image has always been an illusion. Peel back the layers of silk and ermine, and you find all too human frailties, betrayal, heartbreak, and compromise hiding underneath. Point 5. The Princess Diana Conspiracy Theories. No discussion of the royal family's darker shadows would be complete without the tragic story of Princess Diana and the conspiracy theories that cling to her death like a stubborn stain. Diana's death in 1997 was officially ruled an accident. Her driver, intoxicated, crashed the car in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel while fleeing the paparazzi. But for millions around the world, that explanation has never felt like the whole story. Whispers and conspiracy theories have swirled ever since, that Diana was silenced by the royal family for being too outspoken, too independent, too much of a liability to the firm's carefully scripted image. She had, after all, become the people's princess, a symbol of warmth and compassion in a monarchy that can seem aloof and cold. The idea that she was dealt with by shadowy royal fixers is, of course, unproven, and both police and independent investigations have found no evidence of foul play. But the fact that so many people still believe it says something important about the monarchy's reputation, that even in the face of an official verdict, public suspicion remains. Why? Because Diana's story was never just about a princess in a tiara. It was about a woman who refused to be silent and a royal system that didn't know how to handle her. The truth in the end is likely far more mundane than the conspiracy suggests, but the fact that so many people are still asking the question, did the royals kill Diana, shows just how far the monarchy's credibility has slipped in the eyes of the public. Point 6. Profiting from public services. The royals' hidden empire. If there's one story that really rubs salt in the wound, it's the revelation that the royal family's private estates, the duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall, have been quietly cashing in on Britain's public services. In November 2024, investigative journalists uncovered that King Charles III and Prince William's estates have been raking in tens of millions of pounds by leasing properties to NHS trusts, state schools, and even the Ministry of Defense. One deal alone saw Guy's and St. Thomas's NHS Trust paying £11.4 million over 15 years, just to store electric ambulances in a duchy-owned warehouse. Another deal, Dartmoor Prison, leased from the Duchy of Cornwall for £37 million, a site that was reportedly so unsafe it couldn't even be used. It's not technically illegal. The duchies are private property, and the royals are under no legal obligation to show the same kind of transparency as regular landlords. But let's be honest, it stinks. When Britain's hospitals are underfunded and schools are scraping by, seeing millions funneled into royal coffers leaves a bitter taste. Critics have called it daylight robbery, a system where the monarchy can quietly siphon public funds while maintaining the air of selfless service. And let's not forget, the royals already get the sovereign grant, a taxpayer-funded payout that covers their palaces and pageantry. So when they're also taking money from the very institutions the public depends on, it doesn't look like noble stewardship. It looks like business as usual for a family that's never really had to answer to anyone. Point 7. The royals' tax exemptions and offshore fortunes. One of the monarchy's dirtiest little secrets? They've never been particularly keen on paying their fair share. Legally speaking, the monarch isn't required to pay income tax, capital gains tax, or inheritance tax, perks enshrined in centuries of privilege and tradition. King Charles and Prince William have said they voluntarily pay some taxes on their personal income. But here's the catch. Those figures aren't published, and there's no legal requirement to hand over a penny. And it doesn't end there. The duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall, the private estates that bankroll the monarch and the heir, are exempt from corporation and capital gains taxes. These are massive business empires. Commercial properties, farmland, and even urban developments. Ordinary businesses would be paying millions in tax on that kind of operation. The royals? Nothing. And then there's the offshore angle. The 2017 Paradise Papers leak revealed that the Duchy of Lancaster invested millions in offshore funds in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda. Totally legal, but a reminder that the royal family's money often sits in the shadows. It's a sharp contrast to the image of the royals as national stewards living in service to the people. When the rest of us pay what we owe, it's galling to see the Windsors dodging tax bills that would make most of us sweat. Critics say it's an outdated arrangement that props up a system of privilege and secrecy, one that's out of step with the values of a modern democracy. And as the cost of living crisis bites deeper every year, the royal family's reluctance to fully open their books looks less like tradition and more like a rigged game. So there you have it. The British royal family, stripped of the fairy tales and fancy uniforms, looks a lot less like a symbol of national unity and a lot more like a dynasty that spent centuries bending the rules to keep the crown polished and the coffers full. From shady cash handoffs and questionable friendships to blackmail plots, offshore fortunes, and the quiet siphoning of public money, the royal family's story isn't just one of pomp and pageantry. It's also one of privilege without accountability, of power protected by secrecy. And let's be honest, they're not the only powerful institution that's thrived in those shadows. But when you're told these people stand above politics, above profit, and above scrutiny, it's worth remembering that the history books and the balance sheets tell a different story. This isn't about hating the royals or demanding they be perfect. It's about holding up a mirror to the monarchy, seeing past the coronation carriages and diamond tiaras, and asking whether an institution that won't be transparent about its money or its misdeeds really deserves our reverence. If this video made you rethink the myths and the medals, give it a like. And if you're ready for more history that doesn't flinch from the truth, hit subscribe and ring the bell. This is Tenfold Gold, and we'll be back soon, tearing down the polite stories and unearthing the uncomfortable facts. Because history doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be true.